What if a simple act of bravery from an innocent child could undo years of injustice? In a bustling downtown area, a racist cop makes an impulsive decision that turns a man's life upside down. But just as everything seems to be spiraling, a courageous 10-year-old boy speaks out, flipping the narrative completely. This is the story of how a child's bravery can change everything. It's a hot afternoon, and the usual rush of the downtown area is in full swing. The streets are crowded with people moving to and from work, trying to finish up errands before the day's end. The air is filled with the sound of conversations, distant car horns, and the rhythmic tapping of footsteps on the sidewalk. In the midst of it all, a black man, Darren, is walking toward his car, parked legally on the side of the street. He's tired after a long day at work, but there's a certain peace in the air that makes him hopeful for a brief moment of quiet. He places his hand on the door handle of his car, glancing around at the busy street. But just as he begins to breathe easier, a squad car screeches to a stop right next to him. The siren blares for a moment before the officer inside rolls down the window, his eyes fixed on Darren with suspicion. "Hey! Step away from the vehicle," the officer shouts. Darren stands still for a moment, confused. "Excuse me, I've just parked here. Is there a problem?" The officer, his expression hardening, steps out of the car, not even acknowledging Darren's explanation. "You're parked in a restricted zone. Step away from the car." Darren glances down at the street signs. No restrictions. His parking spot is clearly legal. He stands his ground, trying to reason with the officer. "I don't know what you're talking about. I parked legally. There's no restriction here." But the officer doesn't listen. His attitude hardens as he moves toward Darren, his voice growing louder. "I didn't ask for your excuse, man. I saw you park there. Step aside." The crowd on the sidewalk, once bustling with activity, begins to quiet down, and a few people linger by the windows of nearby shops. It's clear that tension is building in the air. Darren, visibly frustrated but trying to keep his calm, speaks up again. "Officer, I'm just trying to go home. Please, I didn't do anything wrong." The officer sneers, not even hiding his disdain. "Don't try to talk to me like you know the rules. You don't belong here." The words hang in the air like an accusation, and Darren can feel his blood boiling. But he knows it's not worth escalating. He holds his ground, his chest tight with frustration, but he keeps his voice steady. As the situation grows more intense, a young boy, about 10 years old, standing a few feet away, watches in confusion. His name is Jordan, and he's been walking home from school, his eyes focused on the ground as he tried to avoid the chaos around him. But the voices, the anger, the tension, all of it draws him in. Jordan looks up just in time to hear the officer's hostile words, his own instincts kicking in. He doesn't know all the details, but something about this doesn't feel right. He watches as the officer towers over Darren, his tone condescending and threatening. Jordan's heart starts to race. He doesn't want to stay silent anymore. This isn't the way it's supposed to be. He steps forward, his small voice cutting through the tension. "Excuse me, sir." "But he didn't do anything wrong," Jordan says, his voice surprisingly steady. The officer whips around, his expression shifting from anger to irritation at the interruption. "And who are you, kid?" The crowd is silent now, all eyes turning toward the small boy standing before the officer, speaking up for the man who is being unjustly accused. Jordan stands tall, despite the fear running through his veins. He knows what he saw, and he knows it's wrong. The officer's eyes narrow as the crowd begins to watch the unfolding confrontation. It's clear that this is not going the way he expected. And in that moment, everything changes. Malik, a 32-year-old black man, leads a simple but meaningful life. He works 2 jobs to support his wife, Jasmine, and their 2 young children. Despite his busy schedule, he makes time for his community, whether it's coaching a youth basketball team, helping neighbors with repairs, or volunteering at the local food bank. He is known for his reliability, his kindness, and his commitment to doing the right thing, even when it isn't easy. Malik grew up in a rough neighborhood, a place where dreams were often stifled by systemic oppression and prejudice. He's seen firsthand the challenges that his people face: racial profiling, discrimination, and limited opportunities. But Malik refuses to let that define him. He works hard, maintains a clean record, and continues to strive for success, not just for himself, but for his family and for others in his community. He teaches his children the importance of education, respect, and perseverance, hoping to break the cycle of negativity that often holds people back in their neighborhood. Malik knows that life isn't always fair, and the world is full of people who will try to bring him down. But he also knows that there's power in staying true to his values, no matter the obstacles. He believes that if he keeps doing the right thing, one day things will change. That belief keeps him going, even when society treats him like he doesn't belong. Officer Thompson, in his mid-40s, has been a member of the local police force for over 20 years. He's known for his quick judgments and a tendency to treat certain communities with disdain. Thompson is a product of his upbringing, raised in a town where racial divides were prevalent and ideas of supremacy went unchecked. His own prejudices were ingrained from an early age, and over the years, he has carried these biases into his work as a police officer. He believes that certain neighborhoods and certain people don't belong in better areas, and that's how he views Malik and others from similar backgrounds. Thompson's prejudice isn't just subtle, it's blatant. He often makes racial comments, belittles the individuals he's supposed to serve, and disregards the rights of black men and women. He sees them as threats, criminals in waiting, and his assumption is that they deserve to be treated with suspicion, if not outright aggression. His actions have gone largely unchallenged for years. The department has turned a blind eye to his conduct, and Thompson has become emboldened by this lack of accountability. In his eyes, his badge gives him the power to do what he pleases without consequence. Over time, he's developed a sense of entitlement that comes with his position, and he's become increasingly reckless in how he exercises his authority. When Malik unknowingly crosses paths with him, he becomes the latest target of Thompson's misplaced aggression. Malik's quiet demeanor, his reserved nature, and the fact that he's simply living his life and trying to go home are of no consequence to Thompson. To the officer, Malik is just another black man in a place where he doesn't belong, and Thompson is determined to remind him of that. The dynamic between Malik, an ordinary man trying to make a life for himself, and Officer Thompson, a man who has built his career on prejudice, is a story that unfolds time and again across this country. And while the details may change, the outcome is often the same. A black individual, living their life, gets caught in the crosshairs of someone who sees their skin color and nothing more. It's a situation that has led to too many injustices in the past, and for Malik, it seems that it will be no different. But what Thompson doesn't know is that Malik is not someone who will just quietly accept injustice. He's a man who's willing to stand up for himself, even in the face of the racist forces that still hold so much power. In this moment, their fates will collide in a way that neither could have anticipated. The hot afternoon sun beats down on the bustling city streets, where people hurry along, lost in their own lives. The air is thick with the sounds of honking horns, hurried footsteps, and distant chatter. Amidst it all, Malik steps out of his car, having just parked in a legal spot, ready to head into a nearby store. He adjusts his jacket, running a hand through his hair, only to be met by the sudden, forceful presence of Officer Thompson. The officer strides over with a look of purpose, his expression already one of suspicion. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" Thompson barks, his eyes scanning Malik's car as if it's guilty of something. Malik, caught off guard, stands tall. "I'm just parked here, officer. This is a legal spot," he responds calmly, trying to keep the situation from escalating. But Thompson isn't interested in listening. Without any reason, he takes a step closer, his voice raising. "Illegal parking! Step away from the vehicle," he demands, his hand resting firmly on Malik's chest. The words hang in the air like a challenge. Malik's chest tightens, his pulse quickening. "Sir, I'm telling you, this is a legal parking spot. I'm not doing anything wrong." But the officer's eyes narrow, a look of disdain crossing his face. He dismisses Malik's explanation without a second thought. "Of course you would say that," Thompson mutters under his breath, always playing the victim. Before Malik can respond, the officer shoves him against his own car, the force startling him, but not enough to knock him off balance. The crowd begins to stir, a few people slowing their steps to watch, others already pulling out their phones to record. "Step back. Step away from the car," Officer Thompson commands, his voice laced with authority. He's already made up his mind, and Malik is clearly the target of his growing anger. "Man, I haven't done anything wrong," Malik says, his voice rising in frustration. His heart is pounding, but he tries to stay composed. He's no stranger to unfair treatment, but today feels different. The tension in the air is palpable. "You're all the same," the officer mutters, barely audible to Malik but loud enough for the nearby bystanders to hear. "Just a bunch of troublemakers." Malik can feel the anger rising in his chest, but he holds it in, trying to stay calm. He can see the officer's mind is already made up, and it has nothing to do with the facts. It's about his race. Malik's mind races with memories of every other time he's been treated unfairly, dismissed, or ignored simply because of the color of his skin. As the officer's grip tightens, a small voice breaks through the tension. "He didn't do anything wrong. He's just a regular person like my dad." The words, spoken with a tremor of fear but also a firm sense of justice, stop everyone in their tracks. The officer's grip loosens ever so slightly, and for the first time, he turns his head to see the young boy who's speaking up. The boy, no older than 10, stands just a few feet away, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes and shaking hands. The boy doesn't back down. "You can't treat people like that just because of their skin color. That's not right," he shouts, his voice quivering with both fear and defiance. The crowd falls silent. The air, thick with tension just moments ago, now hangs heavy with the boy's brave words. Even Officer Thompson, momentarily caught off guard, takes a step back. For a moment, it seems like time has stopped. The words echo, cutting through the officer's hardened exterior. Malik, still standing beside the car, takes a deep breath. He's not sure what's going to happen next, but in that moment, he feels something shift. A shift that he hasn't felt before. Malik looks down at the young boy, his heart swelling with pride. The boy's courage in the face of injustice reminds him of the lessons his own mother taught him: to stand firm no matter what, to never let anyone define who you are based on prejudice or assumptions. The crowd around them remains still, the tension in the air heavy, but this time it's different. The officer, visibly shaken, stares at the boy for a long moment, his face slowly reddening with the weight of his own actions. The young boy's words, simple yet profound, have pierced through the officer's armor of bias. "Where are you watching from? And what time is it? Do you think Marcus's bravery shows us the true meaning of courage and kindness? Share your thoughts below." Officer Thompson stares at the young boy, his expression frozen in shock. The courage in the child's words lingers in the air, cutting through the tension that had been thick with hostility just moments before. Malik, his chest still heavy with adrenaline, stands tall, watching as the officer begins to process the reality of what's happening. The crowd remains silent, eyes darting between the officer and the boy, uncertain of what to expect next. For a few seconds, it's as if time itself has paused. Malik can feel the eyes of the crowd on him, some filled with surprise, others with quiet admiration. The boy, who had stood up for what was right, now stands as a silent but powerful symbol of defiance against injustice. Officer Thompson takes a step back, his hand loosening its grip on Malik's arm. His face flushes with embarrassment as the realization begins to hit him. The child's words echo in his mind. You can't treat people like that just because of their skin color. His own actions suddenly feel out of place, even to himself. The officer looks around, noticing his colleagues standing nearby, their eyes heavy with judgment. His fellow officers have begun to shift uncomfortably, and a few of the onlookers quietly murmur to one another. The weight of the moment has become undeniable. The officer's hardened exterior begins to crack, though he doesn't immediately acknowledge his wrongdoing. He stumbles over his words, clearly flustered. Malik, though, doesn't flinch. He's learned to endure far worse. But today, something's different. The boy stands taller, his heart steadying as the situation shifts. It's as if the truth, spoken so plainly by a child, has caused a seismic shift in the dynamics of power. The crowd watches in silence, and Malik, sensing the change in atmosphere, takes a deep breath. He sees the officer shrinking in his power, not with vindictiveness, but with shame. The young boy stands firm, still unafraid, his eyes locked on the officer. He knows what comes next. "This is wrong," Malik says calmly, his voice cutting through the tension in the air. There's no fear in his tone, just unwavering confidence in his belief that he is in the right. His words ring out, challenging the officer's authority in front of everyone. The quiet intensity in Malik's voice contrasts with the officer's increasingly erratic behavior. It's as if Malik has flipped the power dynamic entirely, rendering the officer's previous actions irrelevant. Officer Thompson hesitates. He looks at Malik, then at the crowd, and finally at his colleagues. The pressure builds, and it's clear that he is now aware of how far his biases have led him astray. Slowly, reluctantly, his hand falls away from Malik's arm. His face betrays the internal conflict now raging inside him. With a faint mutter under his breath, Officer Thompson steps back, still unable to fully confront the gravity of his actions. Malik, free at last, doesn't let the officer's muttering faze him. He looks around at the crowd, his eyes meeting the gazes of people who have witnessed the entire scene unfold. And then, without another word, he turns and walks away, his head held high. His heart races, but it's not from fear. It's from the powerful, overwhelming feeling of doing the right thing. As Malik walks away, the crowd remains still for a moment, and then the whispers begin. The power shift has been completed. The young boy, with nothing but the strength of his words, has overturned the established order. The officer, once so sure of his dominance, now stands exposed for the biases that he could no longer hide. Malik, on the other hand, walks with the quiet pride of someone who has just altered the course of the day, and perhaps the course of many lives. Malik walks away from the scene, a wave of relief sweeping over him. He knows that his actions today have made a difference, and despite the injustice that may still exist in the world, he's proved that courage and truth will always rise to the surface when given the chance. The officer watches as the boy walks away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. For the first time, Officer Thompson is forced to confront the weight of his own actions. The crowd slowly begins to disperse, but the memory of what just happened will linger long after the day is done. For Malik, it's just another day standing up for what's right. But for Officer Thompson, it's a lesson that will follow him long after the crowd is gone. The aftermath of the incident ripples through the community, and Malik's courage has set a series of events in motion that no one could have predicted. The police department's internal investigation begins immediately. Malik's actions, so simple yet so powerful, shine a light on the systemic racism that has been tolerated within the department for years. His words, spoken with the innocence of youth, yet the wisdom of someone who has lived through hardship, become the catalyst for change. Officer Thompson is placed under investigation, his past actions now coming under scrutiny. His history of racial bias and misconduct becomes public, leading to his suspension. He is placed on administrative leave while the department conducts a thorough review of his behavior. The shock of the incident forces the department to confront its own shortcomings, and it becomes clear that Officer Thompson is not an isolated case, but part of a much larger issue within the department. For Malik, the shift in the department's approach feels like a small victory. As he watches the investigation unfold, he begins to realize that his voice, as small as it may have seemed at the time, has had a profound impact. His once nervous steps through the day now feel purposeful. His bravery has already changed his world. But there's still more to be done. In the days that follow, the police department announces a new set of policies aimed at addressing the systemic issues that led to the unjust treatment of Malik and others like him. The department commits to mandatory anti-racism and diversity training for all officers. The news spreads quickly, and the community reacts with a mixture of relief and cautious optimism. For the first time, there is a sense that the department is truly listening. As the policies are put into place, the community begins to rally behind Malik. His words, which once stopped a corrupt system in its tracks, have now sparked a broader movement for change. Community leaders, activists, and everyday citizens come together, all united by the simple truth that justice, fairness, and equality should be the foundation of any legal system. Malik, who has always dreamed of becoming a leader in his community, now finds himself at the forefront of that very movement. With his new sense of hope, Malik takes every opportunity to speak out, sharing his experience and advocating for further reforms. In the community, the changes are palpable. People feel safer not just because of the new policies, but because the trust that was once broken has started to be rebuilt. Parents walk with more confidence in their neighborhoods, knowing that their children's voices will not be dismissed. that they will be heard and treated with dignity. There is a growing sense that the fight for justice is a shared responsibility, and that everyone, no matter their age, has a role to play. Malik joins forces with local leaders, speaking at town halls, advocating for better representation in the police force, and pushing for reforms in every facet of the criminal justice system. His own life has changed in ways he couldn't have anticipated. He now stands as a symbol of resilience and courage, his youthful voice serving as the rallying cry for a more just and equitable society. In a meeting with community leaders, Malik shares his vision for the future, a world where children like him are not feared, but embraced. A world where racial bias is no longer tolerated in the systems that are supposed to protect and serve. The room is filled with applause as Malik speaks, his words having the power to rally not only the people in the room, but everyone listening. Even Officer Thompson's actions are now being closely scrutinized. The new policies he's now subjected to feel like a direct result of Malik's actions, and Malik's story serves as a reminder to officers everywhere that accountability is not optional. The focus shifts to community-oriented policing, with an emphasis on de-escalation and building trust between law enforcement and the people they serve. As Malik continues his journey, he stays grounded in the values of integrity and fairness that his mother instilled in him. His voice grows louder, and his story spreads, inspiring others to take action and fight for justice in their own communities. Malik becomes a beacon of hope, a reminder that even one small act of courage can send shockwaves through a system in need of change. The police department, under the weight of public pressure, becomes an example of reform, leading other law enforcement agencies to follow suit. Malik's bravery has sparked a nationwide conversation about bias, accountability, and the power of youth activism. For Malik, this is just the beginning. He knows there's still much work to be done, but he also knows that change is possible if you have the courage to stand up and speak the truth, no matter how difficult or dangerous it may seem. As he continues his advocacy, Malik holds on to the belief that true justice is not about punishment, but about fairness, empathy, and a system that treats every individual equally. He walks forward, a young leader now, fueled by the hope that his actions will inspire future generations to fight for a better, more just world. The community, once fractured by mistrust and division, begins to heal. Malik's courage has given everyone the chance to reimagine the future, a future where justice, dignity, and equality are no longer just ideals, but a reality. The incident in the downtown area became more than just a confrontation between a boy and a racist cop. It became a turning point in the community. People began to see the power of one voice, especially one as innocent and courageous as that of the 10-year-old boy who spoke up when no one else would. The community, once divided by a growing sense of mistrust between its people and law enforcement, now found itself united behind the young hero. The word spread quickly. The boy's bravery resonated deeply with those who had witnessed the injustice, sparking difficult conversations about race, power, and accountability. People who had once been silent, unsure of how to speak out, were now emboldened by his actions. The town began to rally together, with local leaders and activists calling for police reform and better community engagement. Malik, too, became a symbol of resilience. The boy's words had reached not only the officer, but the community at large, igniting a new sense of urgency around the issues of racial inequality and injustice that had long been ignored. He had faced prejudice himself, but it was his courage and integrity that allowed him to rise above it. In the weeks following the incident, Malik started working alongside local leaders to ensure that no other individual would be subjected to the kind of treatment he had experienced. He didn't just want to stand up for himself. He wanted to create a world where others would feel empowered to speak out against wrongs, regardless of who was perpetrating them. Malik knew that the change he had witnessed within the police department, as well as in the wider community, was just the beginning. He worked tirelessly, speaking at community events, attending meetings, and engaging with leaders to push for concrete steps toward fairness and equality. His voice, once dismissed because of his age and background, now commanded attention. It was a quiet but powerful reminder to everyone in the community that, no matter how young or overlooked you may feel, your words matter. The neighborhood transformed around Malik. What was once a place of silent resentment and division slowly began to thrive on the principles of respect, justice, and empathy. The officers, who had once turned a blind eye to the struggles of the people they were meant to protect, now began to realize the impact of their behavior. The town's leadership understood the importance of diversity in decision-making and the need for policies that ensured everyone felt heard and treated fairly. Malik's journey didn't just end with the changes in his community. He became an advocate for the broader movement to end racial inequality in policing, speaking with compassion, but also with the fire of someone who had lived through the worst of it. Malik shared his vision of a society where everyone, regardless of their skin color, could be assured their rights were protected, their voices heard, and their dignity upheld. As Malik walked through his neighborhood, he could feel the change around him. People greeted him with newfound respect, admiration, and gratitude. He was no longer just the boy who had once been misunderstood and mistreated by those in authority. Now, he was a symbol of what could be accomplished when integrity, courage, and the truth were allowed to lead the way. His impact stretched far beyond his neighborhood, as his story inspired others to act in the face of injustice and to challenge their own biases. The final scene of the day came as Malik walked down the street, hand in hand with his mother, surrounded by neighbors who now saw him not just as a young boy, but as a beacon of hope for the future. The world he lived in had changed, and he knew that, even though there was still work to be done, he had done his part. He had spoken the truth when it mattered most, and that truth had ignited a movement that was impossible to ignore. The truth may be hard to speak, Malik thought, but it's the only thing that will set us all free. His words echoed in his mind as he looked forward, his heart filled with hope for the future he was helping to build.